everybody, or if you're watching this a little bit later, perhaps good day, whatever time of day it happens to be. It is good to be back. For those of you who have been a part of this group or following for a while, you know that I have taken a little bit of a break. So I'm excited to be back with you all and to share the fruits of our contemplative practice and how we bring that into our leadership together. So a little bit of reintroduction, and especially if you're new to the group. Like many of you, I've been a high achiever, push myself pretty hard, and I strive for excellence. And of course, you know, those of us who find ourselves in leadership positions of different kinds know that we want excellence. And what I have found, and I've taught this before, but I have lived it a little bit more recently, is that there's a shadow side to this drive. The shadow side, there are different ways we could talk about it. I think it tends to put the ego in the driver's seat. And we need an ego, we need a persona to kind of exist in the world, and we need all those skills and virtues that we want to kind of highlight and build trust with people. But the challenge is that if we start to identify with that ego is never satisfied, and that's what drives a lot of our problems. So, simple thing that you might think about is think back to when you began your career. You were probably motivated by some kind of idealistic pursuit, like developing your skills and talents in a way that would serve something bigger than yourself and help others. But in a culture that really, I think, pushes us hard towards the ego and towards working hard and even overwork, even those good intentions can kind of get lost as we move through our careers and through our lives and even in our relationships. So if you find yourself in that state, it's okay. It's sort of the human condition, it's human nature. And that's why we talk about practice, because it brings us back to accepting both the good and the struggles of being human. So I want to share with you a little bit today some of the lessons that I've learned about gentleness and bringing gentleness into daily life maybe in a new way that I've learned in these past couple months where I've taken a break. So I've put some posts out there that some of you may have seen, but I really reached a full-blown burnout and even found some early traumas from earlier in my life, and more recent ones with working in healthcare sort of being re-triggered and reactivated, and that really kind of sent me on a tailspin. One of my teachers, Dr. Stephen Parker, he travels a lot he's a psychologist and is also the person who initiated me into the yoga tradition. He does a lot of speaking and traveling, and he commented to me that in Europe, they consider burnout a life-threatening condition. And I think that's wise. I think in the United States, we tend almost to see it as a badge of honor. Like, hey, I'm working so hard that I'm literally killing myself or destroying my body, as if that's somehow a badge of honor. But I think there's wisdom in seeing it as more of a life-threatening condition, which it really is. Long-term stress, anxiety, overwhelm, and burnout, when that stays kind of piled up over time, can have equally disastrous consequences as being exposed to trauma, like a major traumatic event in early life or as an adult. Think about that for a second. That's a powerful thought. And what happens when you're in trauma or PTSD or just that constant state of burnout and overwhelm is that your body literally gets trapped in what we learned probably in grade school as your fight or flight response. Now, they've kind of deepened that in some of the research, and they now talk about, and I mean psychologists, psychiatrists, people who study trauma and stress. It's fight or flight, faint or freeze. Fight, flight, faint, or freeze. And it's the body's response when it's trying to shut down and protect itself. And there's some wisdom in that. Because, right, it's your body trying to kind of reset. But if we keep pushing through, then we're fueling that cycle. And, you know, it's hard it feels like it's never going to end if you're caught up in that. And so it becomes really hard not to entertain thoughts about just ending everything or just wanting to escape if you feel that trapped. Another psychologist friend said, you know, even if maybe you don't have, say, full-blown suicidal thoughts, though that does happen, it's just this thought that, like, geez, I'd love to go to bed and sleep for like a week and just wake up and have all of this kind of be gone, right? It's that desire to escape. If you've ever felt that way on any level, or maybe you feel that way now, I want you to know that you're not alone, and it doesn't have to last forever. And there are things that you can do to take some action to start moving in a healthier direction. Now, there's no blame in this, right? It's not anybody's fault. It's not your fault. Again, it's the human condition. And we're in a culture that just reinforces staying in that state. Now, one of the things that I found in my recent experience is that one of the biggest, almost like traps or challenges, it's like really unfortunate, is that when you're in that constant state of like burnout, and your neurological system and your brain are always in that state, and wanting to disconnect, you start to feel depressed and you feel exhausted. So you don't have the energy to kind of take action in a healthier direction that's going to move things forward. And that's the real trap I've found. And it's the beauty, that's the trap, because we isolate and we feel like we're the only ones who feel that way, and we're always going to feel that way. We're permanently flawed, and that everybody's going to find out. That's what it feels like. Again, some of you might know that intimately yourself. Of course, ultimately it's not true, but just telling yourself with your rational mind isn't enough. You have to find a way to feel it and embody it in your body, in your mind, and in your soul. And that's where the spiritual practice comes in. Another beautiful thing about, a community like this on Facebook or other places is that we can maybe find the energy or the hope that we need to take some small action that breaks that pattern, by listening to a video like this, or posting, or reading other people's posts. So really, want this to be a place where we build a safe and supportive and positive community, when we know that social media isn't always used that way. So the title for this little talk that I'm giving today is a take from what I learned from some of my coaches growing up. And they would say, you're going to play in the real game the same way that you practice. And that was their attempt to kind of motivate us to show up to our practice really focused and giving it our all, because then you're literally training our bodies and our neurological systems to play at that high of a level. So if we apply this to our spiritual practice, our contemplative practice, or our centering practice, how you show up to your practice then is also a mirror for how you're showing up in your life. How you're showing up to and treating your work, your body, your relationships, and really all of your life. So this can be tough to look in this mirror. If you start bringing some more mindfulness into your daily life through your practice, you might start to notice, like, what are you saying to yourself as you go throughout the day? Is it positive and encouraging comments, or is it judgmental and critical comments? How are you holding your body physically, or where are you holding muscle tension? Are you relaxed and aligned and present, or are you tense and holding in your shoulder and maybe in your calves and your lower body, or your breathing is tight, you're not relaxing through your diaphragm, you're bracing for the next big stressful thing to come along, or the next email that's going to overwhelm you, or maybe it's an anticipated tragedy. Some of us are in that state and we don't even know it. We can spend years in that state. So we might not like what we see when we do that, but the good thing is, if we start to recognize it, then we can start to work with that and slowly release and sort of dissolve that tension and that's driving that burnout, that staying in a constant state of freeze, like panicked, stopped, or fight or flight, faint or freeze, any of those. So it's amazing to notice how, even if I'm just sitting, or you're just sitting in a centering prayer and meditation practice, or a basic mindfulness practice, it's still possible to overextend your effort, to grip and hold tension in your body, maybe in your lower body where you're sitting, or in your upper body, or again in your breath. We can hold that same kind of tension in our minds and our thoughts and in our souls. And of course, the body and soul relationship is fluid in this kind of a practice. So what exactly do you hold on to when you're doing this? This can be a really powerful question to ask yourself. Maybe not while you're doing your sitting practice, because you're letting the thoughts go, but afterwards. What am I holding on to? What am I afraid of? What is my body trying to tell me? There's wisdom in that tension if we're willing to listen to it and work with it. Now, the other thing I find is that God or a higher power or the Spirit is always going to send us reminders that we're not to become attached to the outcomes or that come with our practice, or to think that we can control those outcomes or the agenda of what happens in our minds and our bodies and our souls when we give ourselves over to the practice, and in centering prayer and meditation, when we give ourselves over to the presence and action of God or to the divine will, however you think about that. One way that I want to share that I learned this is that I recently enrolled in a series of trauma-informed yoga sessions, which I didn't even know existed until a few months ago. And one of the cool things, I found it really powerful. The teacher states, that everything is a suggestion, and they really try to phrase everything in terms of if you wish and if you choose. So often when we're caught up in burnout, we're just trapped in that should or I have to and constantly driving. But what do we really want to choose to do? We can start practicing that in our body and in our practices, our spiritual practices. So the most important thing in this kind of trauma-informed practice, or we might say just burnout, stress-informed practice, because we know they're very similar, is that we exercise the freedom to choose what we want or what we don't want to do. That's a powerful thing in our practice. Everything becomes an invitation. The teacher that I worked with also gave us subtle clues that I found really, really helpful and powerful. So we would be in an asana or a posture, if you're familiar with practicing yoga, or you can think of this when you're just in a sitting posture, doing a centering prayer meditation practice. So she would give us these clues and say, now do a quick kind of scan and tune into the different parts of your body and notice, where are you holding that extra tension? Where are you over gripping? Where are you overextending your effort in some maybe unconscious thought that I'm trying to get some kind of an outcome, or it's not working, and then my body tenses against that, or I'm bracing, maybe you're bracing yourself for some unforeseen disaster or fear. And again, if your body's caught in that cycle, it's going to show up in your practice as this kind of free-floating fear and anxiety. We may not even have a conscious thing attached to it, like, oh, I'm worried that, I don't know, I'm going to get COVID, or there's going to be a major disaster or something. But in the non-conscious part of our mind, that fear is just rolling over and over again, and in our bodies. And when we do this, we're holding extra tension in our bodies. We're trying harder than we need to. I found myself doing this consistently, and this is going to show up both in your contemplative practice and your centering practice. It's going to show up in your work, in your career. It's going to show up in your relationships, and it's going to show up in daily life. Now, what I found in the practice that was really powerful is that when I did this and I became aware, and I didn't judge myself, I was like, okay, I've got tension here. It's going to bring some breath to that, some awareness. I could tune in at a very subtle level, which I felt particularly, and I'm thinking here of kind of what we might talk of as the emotional or energetic body, which I don't distinguish from the physical body. It's all one. But you can feel it at different levels. So you feel the muscle tension, but then there's an energy that's associated with that, or an emotion. So I would feel this subtle energy, particularly in the front of my chest, from the base of like my root chakra through the heart chakra, heart area, and down into the solar plexus area. So from just above my belly button to just below my neck, top of the sternum actually. I could feel this really subtle energy, or prana, to use the language, or spirit, the language of yoga, in my body, that was sort of this higher wisdom that was guiding my movements and my flow. And I would give myself over to it, and I became the student following the ebb and the flow of these very subtle energies. Now, as I tune in to and trust, like really trust at a deep level, an embodied emotional energy level, that energy in my practice, I then have this gentle kind of flow, and I'm also finding that it's easier to bring that same level of gentleness into my work, into my career, into my relationships with my wife, my kids, friends, family, and daily life. And maybe even most importantly, into my relationship with myself, with my own thoughts, particularly those critical, judgmental thoughts that perfectionism tends to drive. I really feel like in this process, I have become the student again in a really powerful, important way, that I'm tuning back into what I teach and call centering for wisdom, allowing the Spirit to sort of gently guide my choices and my actions, rather than wearing myself out trying to force all of these different actions or outcomes to happen that my ego wants and is attached to, but instead trusting that the outcomes will come in their own time, not in my ego's time or in the way that I think, but in their own time. I want to share one more quick story, and I'm almost skeptical to share it because I've heard other people share stories like this, and I always kind of raise an eyebrow. I'm like, really? But I tell you, when it happens, it's power. It kind of blew my socks off. So, as some of you know, I grew up and practiced in the Catholic tradition as kind of my home native Christianity practice. And I had gone back to, when I kind of hit this wall and I took a break from work, I had gone back to a practice that I haven't done since I was a kid, praying a novena. Now, if you don't know what a novena is, it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this story, at least. Novenas are always done in sets of 9, and I wanted to do the big kahuna. So it was a 54-day novena, and the first 27 days was this intense sort of prayer of asking for, it's the petition part. So I asked just kind of in general for healing from where I was struggling and for simple guidance about where to go next. So that was 27 days of asking. And then the other 27 days was thanking for those prayers having been answered. So thanking for having found some healing and guidance. And the cool thing about that thanking period is you thank even if you don't yet feel the outcome that you wanted or you were praying for. And it's this I thank you for hearing my prayer. I thank you, God, and I trust that it is being answered in a way, whether I can see it or not. Now, this is the part that, again, I kind of raise an eyebrow because I didn't go into it thinking there was a specific outcome that I wanted other than that healing and guidance about where to go next. But on day 54, I was offered a new professional opportunity that essentially doubled my current income level. And a big stressor for me has always been kind of anxieties about money and the sense of lack. So, I mean, again, I always kind of raise an eyebrow or roll my eyes when I hear other people tell these stories, but I mean, it's my experience. It happened. So it's pretty powerful to give ourselves over to this process. And I'm not saying, that there's a particular outcome that you're going to get, but I'm just saying that was my experience of giving myself over. So if you find yourself kind of trapped in that burnout cycle or even more severe trauma or just the stress of years and years of pushing yourself is kind of building up to that same level of being trapped in that fight or flight, faint or freeze cycle, and you're looking to bring some of that centering gentleness into your spiritual practice and your life, to be able to kind of say yes to the grace of the Spirit without having to worry as much about controlling the outcomes, but you're really not sure about how to do this or where to go next, then I want to invite you to book a free breakthrough session with me, which I'm going to put a link to in the chat here. And that breakthrough session will take you to thomasjbushlack.com/apply. Again, it's thomasjbushlack.com/apply. You can pick a time that works for you. We'll get on a call for about 45 minutes. Mostly it's me asking you questions about where you are now and where you'd like to be. And then if I am 100% confident that I can help you get there, I'll discuss that with you. And if not, I'll look for other resources and bless you and send you on your way. So if you're feeling that need for a little more gentleness, go ahead and click on that link and sign up for your free breakthrough session. And thanks, everybody. I look forward to being back with you soon. Take care.